G'day, it's Jamie, and welcome to Where's My Yowie. Today, I'm reading an old newspaper report about bunyips, yowies, and thylacoleos in the 1800s and early 1900s, so we'll get into it. This was published in the Bow Desert Times on Friday, the 30th of July, 1920, titled The Bunyip, Strange Reports, Incidents Near Brisbane by A. Meston. Today in Australia, the word bunyip indicates some mythical or fabulous animal, presumably existing nowhere outside of the human imagination. It came originally from the dialect of the Cammeray and Cammeraygal Aborigines, who inhabited the Port Jackson district in the days when the first fleet under the command of Captain Phillip sailed into Botany Bay in 1778. In the remarkable pamphlet published by James Ives at the office of the Sydney Gazette in 1812, he spells the word in the form of bunyip, B-A-H-N-Y-I-P, and describes it as a large black animal like a seal with a terrible voice which creates terror among the Aborigines. Finally, the name became bunyip, and as such it remains today. The average Australian considers it correct to laugh or sneer at the story of the bunyip, but it is quite unusual for the average man to sneer or laugh at any subject of which he is profoundly ignorant. Nearly all those legends of mysterious animals handed down by folklore in the tradition of various races evidently refer to the last survivors of some otherwise extinct species. The moa would today be the bunyip of the Maoris, if his skeletons were not available to prove his existence in some comparatively recent period. The scientific world would ridicule the existence of one of the ganoid fishes being alive in Australia today if the living specimens of the Neoceratodus were not common in the Mary and Burnett rivers. Who would believe that such animals as the Diprotodon, Nothotherium, and Thylacoleo ever lived on the Darling Downs if the fossil bones were not in our museum as infallible proof? The bunyip story runs through all Australian history. Back in the convict period of New South Wales, some remarkable and mysterious animal was reported in various deep lagoons, and in 1834, a strange animal like a seal was seen in Lake Cowell and Lake George. Report from Murrurundi. Within the last fortnight, some uncanny-looking animal was reported in New South Wales near Murrurundi, and in the case that the man who saw him promptly fled up a tree while his pack of dogs ran home at a record pace. The bunyip was a well-known animal in the Great Kamilaroi, Wirrajunji and Awabakal dialects of New South Wales. Ridley in 1852 reported a dog-like monster called Marsupial in the lagoon between Narran and the Barwon rivers. The Aborigines called the Barwon a Barwoon. In the Kamilaroi dialect, there was a big lagoon called Mayan Bar, in which lived two mysterious animals or water spirits called Yowie and Wawi, that rambled about on land at night and had terrible voices that scared the Aborigines temporarily out of their senses. In my young days, Wawi inhabited the Wawaran Lagoon near Port Macquarie and occasionally killed Aborigines. The evil spirit Wandong sometimes took the shape of a bunyip and was the friend of Warra Wilburu, a demon who inserted a rock crystal in the bodies of men and made them sick. At times, the bunyip became a Thilkuma, the terrible fire spirit, who is one day to burn up the whole earth, and all the bad people it contains. Warrawilburu is now represented by one of the places of the dark Milky Way. The bunyip belief was common in Victoria, where he was called Moorup, very nearly the same as Moorang, the name of the bunyip in the 4 dialects of Moreton Bay. And the story extends north to Cape York and west to Coopers Creek. The descriptions of the animal are identically the same from all quarters from the last 100 years, and have been familiar to me for the last 50 years. I have heard them from Aborigines over an area of thousands of miles, and exactly the same description was given to the strange animal recently seen near Murrurundi. A terrible voice. In every case, it was an animal the size of a Newfoundland dog, intensely black, Burradang, with a terrible voice, a dweller in the dark lagoons, but capable of strolling around on land. My first experience of a Queensland bunyip was in 1874, when camped with one of the Muirs of Benoa, near a big, deep lagoon behind Burleigh Head, the jailing of the Aboriginals. The original white man's name was Burleigh Head. This animal was not seen by Muir or myself, but we heard his voice and it was never forgotten, being exactly the same as reported from all over other localities. The early settlers were quite satisfied about some strange animal being there, and the belief is still prevalent in that locality. Old Ned Harper told me it was seen by himself and 3 others, apart from a number of Aborigines by whom it was frequently seen and heard. No Aboriginal will ever bathe or fish or even drink in a waterhole where a bunyip is said to exist, nor camp anywhere near the place. Bunyips have been reported from Kent's Lagoon at Fassivern, from lagoons at Nindy Gully, a long lagoon near Roma, a lake on Fraser Island, and at various places north to Lake Eacham and on the Atherland Tableland. Surveyor Fraser told me he was certain there was some large animal in Lake Eacham and gave good reasons. It is certain that no Aboriginal will go into that lake. Now we are coming nearer to Brisbane, and a bunyip is said to inhabit Hillyard Creek, which visitors by road to Cleveland cross an old rickety, noisy wooden bridge about 3/4 of a mile from Ormiston Station, 3 miles from Cleveland. When this animal was reported to me, he had been seen by 2 people and heard by at least a dozen, having created a considerable scare in the neighbourhood while being a special terror to horses and dogs. Settlers' accounts. The recently reported Murrurundi bunyip appears to have sent the man's dogs home for their lives. The following graphic description was given to me by a German settler. Mein Gott, Meister Meshton, it was something's terrible. I have a von dog, a brave dog he was, frightened mid-nothings. If he sees carpet snakes, was 40 feet long, he would bite him mid the tail and bark like blazes. But one day he was see this terrible thing, and he ran home like he was mad and crawl under the barn, and stopped there 2 days. Never more he gave me over that paddock. I have one very quiet horse, was good for spring cart or buggy, and one day he was see this frightful thing, and he was go mad, and shump the fence into the main road, and then shump the other fence into his own paddock, and was shake and sweat and snort for 2 days. Never more can I get him over the bridge on that creek, but he rear up and snort, and I must go back and get another horse. The nearest settler to the lagoon is a rather remarkable man who has travelled much and speaks German, Spanish and French. A man whose word no one who knows him would think of doubting. This man and his wife and family have heard the cries of animals nightly on scores of occasions, not far from the front of the house, and says the sounds are enough to scare anybody. 4 other people gave the same description. The cries have been heard even at Ormiston railway station. Weird, uncanny sounds. Adjoining the lagoon is a cultivation paddock owned by Mr. A. Rees of Cleveland, and the evidence in favour of the bunyip theory was enough to induce me to camp there alone from time to time for 8 nights, during which was my luck to hear the animal on 3 nights, and certainly the cries bore no resemblance whatever to the call of any animal known in Australia. They were the most weird, uncanny sounds within my recollection. Reese had a married couple for some time on the farm, and both husband and wife told me they heard the cries repeatedly, the wife becoming finally so nervous as to require a change elsewhere. It is certain also that the horses on the farm had a great dread of the lagoon and camped at night in the farthest corner of the paddock. A young fellow working for Reese told me he saw the bunyip on 2 occasions, once about 50 yards from the water, standing by a tree, an animal remarkably black, about 6 feet in height, with a head like a big kangaroo dog and long drooping ears like those of a spaniel. Once only, about 10 in the morning, was it my luck to see a very brief glimpse of his head and the top of his shoulders. A head like that of a seal, with long ears, and intensely black. He was in the middle of the waterhole, about 20 feet in depth, and dived like a flash out of sight. The settler told me that he could be heard several nights in succession, and not again for a week or a fortnight. In 1874, the Aborigines told me of a moorang in that creek, and that they would not fish or bathe there or camp near the vicinity, and only cross the creek lower down, where there was no water. This was confirmed recently by a gentleman, Mr. Burnett, who was the manager for Captain Hope at Ormiston nearly 50 years ago, well known in recent years as a sawmiller and Crown Lands Ranger, now settled on a farm adjoining Reese. Some very remarkable tracks were seen by me, a few very much like those of a human hand, with a thumb at the back, and others like the track of a large emu, with a toe at the heel of the foot. It is a singular coincidence that the Aborigines from the Logan River, south to Port Macquarie, had a belief that one of the 2 sons of By-and-Me, the Aboriginal creator, appeared occasionally on Earth as a bunyip, a big emu or a huge kangaroo, but always with the foot of an emu. If an Aboriginal hunter stalked this sacred kangaroo or emu, either would dissolve into thin air and vanish the instant the hunter raised his spear or nullah. The hind feet, like an emu, Gnoreen Lina, were all in the legends of the bunyip. A Victoria Park memory. About 50 years ago, a bunyip was reported in a deep waterhole in Yorks Hollow, Victoria Park, Brisbane, a favourite camping place of the Aborigines in the early days, and so precise and circumstantial were the reports of those who swore that they had seen him that a party of armed policemen actually advanced on the lagoon by the way of present Gregory Terrace in the form of a hollow square or Macedonian phalanx or single file, to surround and arrest the bunyip and charge him with being drunk and disorderly, disturbing the public peace, and having no awful means of support. The morning paper of that time had considerable correspondence and paragraphs, including a full account of the charge of the heavy police brigade, from whom the terrified bunyip had probably fled to Hilliard Creek. Of those animals reported as bunyips, a few solitary survivors from some ancient species drawing near to extinction, like the aurochs of Russia, the few Highland cattle of Scotland from prehistoric ancestors, or the Neoceratodus still living in the Mary or Burnett rivers of Queensland. We may be quite certain there are yet unknown birds and animals to be discovered in Queensland. In 1869, on Bell and Kerr, at 4,500 feet. A jet black animal, like a big dog, ran past me in thick scrub and vanished over the edge of the mountain, badly scarring a Tanner Island native who was with me at the time. Who can say that the Banshee of Ireland and the Kelpie of Scotland are not the echoes of some ancient ancestors long since extinct? The end. That was pretty interesting. This I liked how he mentioned early on in the Kamilaroi dialect. There was two mysterious animals or water spirits called Yowie and Wawi, and I've known that the Kamilaroi are probably responsible for what we know the term Yowie, but they've spelt Yowie here, Yohwee, which is really interesting. Okay, that's it from me. I'll get back to you all next time. Bye.